What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a morning talk show expecting a conversation about his latest film, only to be blindsided by accusations, disrespect, and a host who refuses to let him speak? In just 45 seconds, a simple question about his career choices would spiral into one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history, exposing a host's true colors and forcing a legend to make a choice between his dignity and staying silent. This is the story of how Denzel Washington walked onto the Today Show set and walked right back off, leaving Savannah Guthrie speechless and the entire panel frozen in shock. The morning started like any other. Denzel Washington, dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit, arrived at the Today Show studios to promote his newest directorial project. The energy in the building was electric. Crew members whispered excitedly as he made his way through the hallways. This was supposed to be a celebration, a victory lap for a man who had given audiences decades of unforgettable performances and was now stepping behind the camera once again to tell stories that mattered. The segment was scheduled for the 8:30 block, right after the commercial break. Savannah Guthrie sat in her usual spot, flanked by Hoda Kotb and Craig Melvin. Al Roker stood nearby, ready to jump in with his signature warmth and humor. The cameras began rolling, the familiar Today Show theme music faded out, and Savannah flashed her practiced smile directly into the camera. "We are so thrilled to have a true Hollywood icon with us this morning," she began, her voice dripping with the kind of enthusiasm that morning show hosts perfect over years of early wake-up calls. Academy Award winner, director, producer, and one of the most talented actors of our generation. Please welcome Denzel Washington. The audience applauded. Denzel walked onto the set with his characteristic grace, shaking hands with each panel member before taking his seat across from Savannah. Hoda beamed at him. Craig nodded with respect. Al gave him a warm pat on the shoulder. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. "Denzel, thank you so much for being here," Savannah said, leaning forward slightly in her chair. "Thank you for having me," Denzel replied, his voice calm and measured. "So let's talk about this new film. You're directing again, and from what we've seen in the trailers, it looks absolutely stunning. What drew you to this particular story?" Denzel began to answer, his hands gesturing gently as he spoke about the themes of redemption, family, and the complexity of human nature that the film explored. He talked about working with the cast, about the challenges of wearing both the director's and actor's hats simultaneously, about the locations they chose and why they mattered to the story. Savannah nodded along, but there was something in her expression that didn't quite match the warmth of the conversation. Her smile seemed tighter. Her eyes kept darting to her notes. "That's fascinating," she said, cutting him off mid-sentence. "But I want to go back to something you said in an interview a few months ago. You made some comments about the film industry, about how it treats certain stories, certain voices. Some people felt those comments were, well, let's just say controversial." Denzel's expression didn't change, but there was a shift in his posture. Subtle, but noticeable. "I don't think what I said was controversial at all. I think I spoke the truth about an industry I've been part of for over 40 years. "Right, but don't you think," Savannah pressed, her voice taking on an edge, "that someone in your position, someone who has had such incredible success and opportunity, should maybe be a little more grateful? I mean, you've won 2 Oscars. You've been nominated countless times. You've made millions of dollars. Isn't it a bit ungrateful to criticize the very system that gave you all of that?" The studio went quiet. Hoda shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Craig's eyes widened slightly. Al looked down at his hands. This wasn't the light, promotional conversation anyone had expected. Denzel took a slow breath, his jaw tightening, just barely. "Grateful," he repeated, the word hanging in the air like smoke. "I am grateful. I'm grateful for every opportunity I've earned. But gratitude doesn't mean silence. Gratitude doesn't mean I should ignore the problems I see or pretend they don't exist. But you have to admit, Savannah continued, completely undeterred, that your success story is proof that the system works. If you can make it, if you can become who you are, then doesn't that show that maybe these quote-unquote problems you're talking about are exaggerated? Denzel leaned back slightly, studying her face. Are you seriously asking me that question? I'm asking you to consider that maybe, just maybe, you're seeing problems that aren't really there, or at least not as bad as you make them out to be. Savannah, Hoda interjected softly, trying to redirect. I think what Denzel is trying to say is that I can speak for myself, thank you, Hoda, Savannah snapped, not even looking at her co-host. Her focus remained locked on Denzel. I just think our viewers deserve to hear both sides. They deserve to know that not everyone agrees with this narrative that Hollywood is some terrible broken place. Denzel's expression hardened. I never said Hollywood was terrible. I said it had issues that need to be addressed. There's a difference between critique and condemnation. And if you can't understand that, then maybe we're having the wrong conversation. Oh, I understand perfectly, Savannah shot back, her voice rising slightly. What I understand is that you've been given every advantage, every opportunity, and now you want to sit here and complain about how hard everything is. Do you know how that sounds to people? Who are actually struggling? To people who would kill for even a fraction of the opportunities you've had? The other panelists looked horrified. Craig tried to step in. I don't think that's what he's saying at all. Denzel has always been an advocate for... Craig, please, Savannah said sharply. Let me finish. Denzel held up a hand, his voice dropping to that dangerous, quiet tone that anyone who knew him recognized as a warning. Let me ask you something, Savannah. Do you think I didn't struggle? Do you think I didn't face rejection after rejection? Do you think doors just magically opened for me because of who I am? I think doors opened because you're talented, she replied. And I think you should acknowledge that instead of playing the victim. Playing the victim, Denzel repeated slowly. Is that what you think I'm doing? I think you're using your platform to push an agenda that doesn't reflect reality. And I think it's irresponsible. Hoda looked like she wanted to crawl under the desk. Al had his hand over his mouth, clearly shocked. Craig was shaking his head in disbelief. This had gone so far off the rails that there was no bringing it back. Denzel stood up, not quickly, not dramatically. He simply rose from his chair with the same dignity he'd carried his entire career. I came here this morning to talk about a film I care deeply about. A film that tells a story I think is important. I didn't come here to be lectured by someone who has no idea what she's talking about. Excuse me? Savannah's face flushed red. I think I have every right to ask tough questions. That's my job. Tough questions, Denzel said, his voice steady, but filled with barely contained anger, are not the same thing as disrespectful accusations. Tough questions require actual curiosity, actual interest in understanding someone's perspective. What you're doing is performing. You're trying to create a moment at my expense, and I'm not going to sit here and participate in that. If you can't handle a real conversation, Savannah shot back, standing as well, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. A real conversation requires two people who respect each other. And right now, you've made it very clear that you don't respect me, my experiences, or anything I have to say. So I'm done. You're done? Savannah laughed, but it was harsh and bitter. You're just going to walk off? That's very professional. More professional than what you've done here this morning, Denzel replied. He turned to the other panelists. Hoda, Craig, Al, it was good to see you all. I'm sorry we didn't get to have the conversation I came here for. Hoda stood quickly, reaching out. Denzel, please, we can... But Savannah interrupted again, her voice now openly hostile. Oh, let him go, Hoda. If he wants to throw a tantrum because he got asked a few questions he didn't like, then that's on him. Denzel stopped. He turned back slowly, and the look on His face made even Savannah take a small step back. A tantrum, he said quietly. You think this is a tantrum? Let me tell you what a tantrum looks like, Savannah. A tantrum is a grown woman who gets upset when someone pushes back on her narrow worldview. A tantrum is attacking a guest because you've decided before they even sit down that you know their story better than they do. A tantrum is being so committed to your own narrative that you can't even hear what someone is actually saying to you. How dare you? Savannah hissed. How dare I? Denzel's voice rose for the first time. How dare you? I've spent 40 years earning the right to speak on these issues. 40 years working, learning, growing, making mistakes, and learning from them. What have you done? You sit in a comfortable chair for a few hours every morning and ask questions someone else wrote for you. You don't know struggle. You don't know what it's like to have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. You don't know what it's like to be told you're not good enough, not marketable enough, not the right fit, over and over again, until you prove them so wrong that they have no choice but to acknowledge you. And you certainly don't have the right to tell me that my experiences aren't valid. The studio was dead silent. Even the crew members behind the cameras had frozen, unsure whether to keep filming or cut away. Savannah's face was bright red now, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You think you're so much better than everyone else. You think because you've won some awards and been in some movies that you're above being questioned. I don't think I'm better than anyone, Denzel said, his voice returning to that dangerously calm tone. But I know I deserve basic respect. And I know that what you've done here today isn't journalism. It isn't tough interviewing. And it certainly isn't professional. It's mean-spirited. It's small. And it's beneath what this show is supposed to be about. Craig finally found his voice, standing up and trying to physically position himself between them. Okay, I think we need to take a breath here. Everyone just needs to... No, Craig, Denzel said, not taking his eyes off Savannah. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this needed to be said. I've been nothing but respectful to this show, to this network, to everyone I've worked with over the years. But I won't sit here and be disrespected by someone who clearly brought me on just to tear me down. That is not what I was doing, Savannah insisted, but her voice wavered slightly. Then what were you doing? Denzel asked. Because from where I'm standing, you had an agenda from the moment I sat down. You weren't interested in my film. You weren't interested in my perspective. You just wanted to put me in my place, to make yourself look tough or edgy or whatever it is you think you were accomplishing. Al finally spoke up, his usually cheerful voice somber. Denzel, man, I think maybe we all just got off on the wrong foot here. Can we start over? Can we talk about the film and why it matters to you? Denzel looked at Al, and his expression softened slightly. Al, I appreciate that. I really do. But the damage is done. I can't sit here and pretend like this is okay. I can't pretend like the last 10 minutes didn't happen. So you're really leaving, Hoda said quietly, and there were actual tears in her eyes. You're really walking out. I have to, Denzel said gently. Because if I stay, if I sit back down and continue like nothing happened, then I'm saying this behavior is acceptable. And it's not. It's not okay to invite someone onto your show and then attack them. It's not okay to dismiss someone's lived experiences because they don't fit your narrative. And it's not okay to use your platform to belittle people who are trying to make the world better. Make the world better, Savannah scoffed. Give me a break. You're making movies, Denzel. You're not curing cancer. That was the final straw. Denzel shook his head slowly, a sad smile crossing his face. And there it is. You really don't get it. You really think that art doesn't matter, that stories don't matter, that representation and visibility and giving voice to experiences that have been silenced don't matter. That tells me everything I need to know about you, Savannah. And it tells me that there's no point in continuing this conversation. He began to remove his microphone, carefully unclipping it from his lapel and placing it on the chair he'd been sitting in. The gesture was so final, so deliberate, that it sent a clear message to everyone watching. This wasn't an impulsive decision. This was a choice made with full awareness of what it meant. "You're making a big mistake," Savannah said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. She was starting to realize, perhaps, that this wasn't playing out the way she'd expected. "The only mistake I made," Denzel replied, "was thinking I could come here and have an honest conversation about something I care about. I should have known better. I should have remembered that some people are more interested in controversy than in truth." Craig moved toward Denzel, extending his hand. "For what it's worth, man, I think you've been nothing but gracious, and I'm sorry this happened." Denzel shook his hand firmly. "I appreciate that, Craig. You're a good man." He turned to Hoda. "You too, Hoda. Don't let this change who you are." Hoda nodded, wiping at her eyes. Al came over and gave Denzel a hug, whispering something in his ear that made Denzel nod. And then Denzel Washington, one of the greatest actors of his generation, turned and walked off the Today Show set. He didn't storm off. He didn't slam anything or shout or make a scene. He simply left, with his head held high and his dignity intact. Behind him, Savannah stood in the middle of the set, her face a mixture of anger and something else, confusion maybe, or the dawning realization that she'd pushed too far. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of the uncomfortable silence that filled the studio. Hoda was the first to move, walking over to her chair and sitting down heavily. Craig followed, running a hand over his face. Al looked at the camera, then at Savannah, then at the floor. "Well," Savannah finally said, her voice trying for casual but landing somewhere around defensive, "I guess we've all just witnessed someone who can't handle a challenging interview." No one responded. Not Hoda. Not Craig. Not Al. The silence was deafening. "We should go to commercial," Craig said quietly. "We're not going to commercial," Savannah snapped. "We're going to continue with the show." "Savannah," Hoda said, her voice shaking slightly, "I think we need to take a break. I think we all need a minute." "I don't need a minute," Savannah insisted. "I didn't do anything wrong. He came on this show with an attitude, and when I called him on it, he couldn't handle it." Craig's head snapped up. "Are you serious right now? Did we just watch the same thing? You attacked him, Savannah. From the second he sat down, you were looking for a fight." "I was doing my job," she shot back. "No," Craig said firmly. "That wasn't journalism. That was personal. And it was wrong." The producer's voice came through their earpieces, telling them to go to commercial, to cut away, to do something, anything, to stop this disaster from continuing. But Savannah stood frozen, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what had just happened. Denzel Washington, meanwhile, was already in the elevator, heading down to the ground floor. His phone was buzzing in his pocket with messages from his publicist, his manager, his friends who'd been watching live. But he didn't check them. Not yet. He just took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and prepared to walk out of the building and into whatever came next. Because some things are more important than good publicity. Some things are more important than playing nice. And dignity, self-respect, standing up for what you believe in, even when it costs you something, those things matter more than a morning show interview ever could. The elevator doors opened. Denzel stepped out into the lobby. People stared at him, some with phones out, already recording, already posting to social media. He ignored them all, pushing through the front doors and out onto the street where his car was waiting. As he slid into the back seat, the driver caught his eye in the rearview mirror. "Rough morning, sir?" Denzel smiled, a real smile this time. "You could say that. But you know what? I feel pretty good about it." And he did, because he'd made the choice that mattered. He'd chosen himself, his values, his truth, over the comfort of staying silent and playing along. He'd walked away from disrespect, from condescension, from someone who wanted to diminish him and everything he stood for. Back in the studio, the Today Show finally cut to commercial. Savannah sat down in her chair, her hands trembling slightly. Hoda and Craig weren't looking at her. Al had walked off set entirely. The crew members avoided eye contact, busy with tasks that suddenly seemed very urgent. In the control room, producers were frantically making phone calls, trying to figure out how to handle what had just been broadcast to millions of viewers across the country. How do you explain that you just witnessed one of Hollywood's most beloved figures walk off your set because your host couldn't show basic respect? How do you spin that into something that doesn't make your show look terrible? The answer, of course, was that you couldn't. There was no spinning this. There was no making it better. What had happened, live and in full view of everyone. Denzel Washington had stood up for himself, had refused to be treated poorly, had made it clear that there are lines you don't cross, no matter who you are or what platform you have. And in doing so, he'd shown everyone watching what integrity looks like, what self-respect looks like, what it means to know your worth and refuse to let anyone diminish it, even if it means walking away from something that could have benefited your career, your project, your visibility. The commercial break ended. Savannah put on her professional smile, but it was strained. Hoda and Craig returned to their seats, but the easy chemistry that usually defined the show was gone, replaced by an awkward tension that was impossible to hide. "Welcome back," Savannah said, her voice tight. "We're going to continue with our next segment, which focuses on..." But nobody was really listening anymore. Everyone watching at home, everyone in the studio, everyone who would see the clips that were already going viral on every social media platform, they were all still thinking about what they'd just witnessed. They were thinking about Denzel's calm strength, his refusal to back down, his willingness to sacrifice a promotional opportunity rather than compromise his dignity. They were thinking about how Savannah had revealed something ugly in herself, something small and petty and threatened by someone who refused to play the game the way she wanted it played. They were thinking about how the other panelists had tried to intervene, had tried to salvage the situation, but had been shut down and dismissed. Most of all, they were thinking about that moment when Denzel stood up, when he made the decision that enough was enough. That moment of pure clarity when he chose himself over the show, over the potential backlash, over everything except his own sense of what was right. It was a moment that would be replayed over and over, a moment that would be analyzed and discussed and debated, a moment that would become a symbol of something larger, something important about standing up for yourself and refusing to be diminished by people who think their platform gives them the right to tear others down. And in his car, heading back to his hotel, Denzel Washington felt at peace. He'd done what needed to be done. He'd said what needed to be said. And he'd walked away with his head held high, his integrity intact, and his sense of self stronger than ever. Because that's what legends do. They don't compromise on the things that matter. They don't stay silent when they should speak up. And they don't let anyone, no matter how powerful or prominent, make them feel small. That's the lesson of this moment. That's what everyone who watched it would take away. Not the drama, not the controversy, not the spectacle of it all, but the simple, powerful truth that Denzel Washington had demonstrated with such grace and strength. Know your worth. Stand up for yourself. And never, ever let anyone treat you as less than you are. That's what happened when Denzel Washington walked onto the Today Show expecting a conversation and found himself in a confrontation. That's what happened when a host forgot that respect is earned, but basic human decency should be given freely. That's what happened when dignity met disrespect and refused to back down. In 45 seconds, everything changed. A simple promotional appearance became something much more significant. A morning show interview became a master class in self-respect. And Hollywood's icon reminded everyone why he's earned that title, not just through his talent, but through his character, his integrity, and his refusal to be anything less than exactly who he is.